Hi, this is Vance Powell, and you're watching Burl TV.
Burl Audio.
You know what? I can now feel comfortable living in both worlds. I can live in Pro Tools, I can live in tape, either one, because the quality of the converter is so good and so musical and so natural that it feels like my tape machine. If I can get that transfer from that tape the best possible way I can possibly have it, then that's what I want. And that's why I have the Burl. You know, my new motto is, if it has to be digital, it's going to be a Burl. So what we did is we just rewound, we hooked up the outputs of the mothership into the tape machine, flew it right back on the tape, and there was no way you could ever hear the difference between the two. No one will ever hear it. I can't hear it. No one's ever going to hear it. And that to me says a lot, because that transfer characteristic is really, really important to me. The fact that I can do tape safeties into the mothership and feel confident that they sound the absolute best they're ever going to be. That's the thing that gives me so much hope for the future. Well, I decided that I was very tired of the way my digital world sounded. And a couple years ago, I had really been floored the first time I heard the mothership on the mothership tour over at Ocean Way here in Nashville. And that seed in my mind that had been planted that day had just sort of got to the point where it needed to germinate. And I was doing a record a few weeks ago, and it was a record that I was producing, and I cut it all on tape. And then because of the complexity of the music, we're going to cut it on tape and then transfer it to Pro Tools. And you know, even at the best sample rate that I could actually work at effectively, it was not very good. And it just really kind of made me mad. So I had just been sort of thinking about it. So when the opportunity came about to do it, I made a bunch of changes here in the studio that was going to allow it. I called the guys up and I said, I want to do this. And that was the deal. And it wasn't like I'd listened to a bunch of other converters or talked about them or anything. And I have listened to some of them, and there's definitely converters that are better than what I had. But this just far outshines everything that I had listened to at that point. The first record I did on the Burl is a band from Australia called Kingswood. Our initial thoughts on the record were to try to make it be a 32-track, dual 16-track tape record. And I had every intention on doing that. After a couple days of recording, I sort of had seen that it was not going to work that way. There just needed to be some massaging. So I had been transferring everything into the Burl as sort of a safety at that point, and just keeping everything on tape. So when I kind of got to the point where I knew that the record was going to end up being a Pro Tools record, I started not like listening for the first time, but I just sort of thought, well, let me just try this test, because I know it's going to be better than what I'm used to, but let me just try it. And I put up on 16 faders of the desk the tape, and on another 16 faders of the desk the Pro Tools session safety from tape, and I used the A bus for the tape and the B bus for Pro Tools. No, I locked the faders so that everything was in unity, and basically just sort of for my own thing. Oh, let's try this out. Let's just see, because I know I'll be able to hear the difference. And I sat down and hit play, and even though I knew which one was which, I couldn't hear the difference. And I listened to it loud. I listened to it quiet, and I can't honestly tell you that I could hear the difference. So I thought to myself, well, maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe I'm crazy. So I started asking some other people to come by and listen. And they couldn't really hear the difference either. And so that was the day when I said, you know what? I can now feel comfortable living in both worlds. I can live in Pro Tools, I can live in tape, either one, because the quality of the converter is so good and so musical and so natural that it feels like my tape machine. And it's not going to completely replace the tape machine for me, because I love that way of working. I love the limitations that it imposes, and the sound it imposes, because it does impose a sound. But if I can get that transfer from that tape the best possible way I can possibly have it, then that's what I want. And that's why I have the Burl. You know, my new motto is, if it has to be digital, it's going to be a Burl. So when we came to Blackbird, I brought the Mothership with me. I disconnected the converters that the Pro Tools system at Blackbird had, and I connected the Burl. I set up the studio so that the tape machine malted, the playback of the tape machine malted both to the console and directly to the Burl. So there was a split. So everything we recorded, everything, whether it went to whether it was recording the tape, whether it was a master take or not, was recorded both in the Burl and on tape. And if we decided not to use that take, we just playlisted it, put it away. And the reason being I like to do that is that I get the sound of the machine, the electronics in the machine, that imparts its own particular sound. And also it allows me, if at any point something goes wrong with the tape, which rarely happens, but sometimes it happens, I have a non-tape, in other words, a first generation, absolute pristine quality version of the take in Pro Tools via the Burl. So, via the Mothership, I should say. Therefore, the great thing about it is if I decide that I want to keep this session on tape, which happens a lot here in my studio, I can, but yet there's an edit. I can use the original input from the, into the Mothership via the tape machine, and like the tape machine and input, to fly that back onto the tape and lock. And you never ever hear the difference. We had an issue on one of the sessions where a marker got misplaced, and something got punched in basically over all the drums. It was a thing. It happens, it happens with tape. There's no undo, there's only redo. But the great thing is that I had the safeties from the Mothership. So what we did is we just rewound, we hooked up the outputs of the Mothership into the tape machine, flew it right back on the tape, and there was no way you could ever hear the difference between the two. No one will ever hear it. I can't hear it. No one's ever going to hear it. And that to me says a lot, because that transfer characteristic is really, really important to me. So that if I do want to keep something on tape, but I do want to do some editing, that's the best possible use of Pro Tools, is really as an editor. It can turn into a big unwieldy thing when you start moving, pushing kick drums and snare drums around and all that. I'd rather it be sort of like a tape, like, okay, well, here's this take, here's this take, here's take, and then we just cut it together. But that's just me. The fact that I can do tape safeties into the Mothership and feel confident that they sound the absolute best they're ever going to be is the total reason. I mean, I don't want to say more than anything, but that's the thing that gives me so much hope for the future, and why I'm not so reticent about recording a record in Pro Tools anymore, or in any digital format, I should say. Digitally would be the correct term. So once our time over at Blackbird was done, we basically did all our basic tracks, cut all our basic tracks to tape, and then transferred from tape into the Mothership. When that part of the project was done, we came over here to Sputnik. This is my studio. I share with my partner Mitch Dane. His side, he has that side over there. I'm on this side. We came over here, and even though you can't really see right now, there's guitars and amps and everything all over the floor here. When we came over here to do overdubs, once we got here, no tape was involved, so everything's been straight into the Mothership, and I got to be honest with you, it's been fantastic. I knew it was going to be from having the B2s and hearing the transfer characteristic of the B2s, but it's like having a whole bunch of B2s, and that's a really, really, really powerful thing in a relatively small compact space. As far as setting it up, I came over a couple days ago in the morning with the mothership, pulled my old interfaces out, put it in, moved one thing to make a little space for it, hooked a couple cables up, and it just worked. It was fantastic. Third Man, I've been a little, this year's been an interesting year because Jack's kind of taken the year off, sort of, as far as recording. So, but one of the things that we are doing at Third Man that's really cool, and this doesn't exactly really have anything to do with the mothership or really much Burl gear, other than some B2s we have at the studio that we do tape transfers with, is that we've been doing live to basically they call it direct-to-acetate. There's a venue down at Third Man, and we installed a console back behind the wall, one of the new Rupert Neve consoles, 5088 back there, and there's a 1958 Scully lathe from King Records there, and we've been doing live shows straight to acetate. So there's no mixing, there's no mixing other than what happens at that moment in time. No remixing, no safety net. It's sort of the ultimate in balls out recording, if you know what I mean. Because there's if something screws up, you have to tell the band to stop and we have to cut the record again. So luckily we haven't had much trouble. We did have C6 Steve forget his guitar. That was kind of funny. He got on stage and didn't have his guitar, so we had to make a tape edit and then cut the vinyl again, cut the lacquer again. But it's a really rewarding thing when you're done, and then you go, wow, that record is done. It's totally done. Like, it couldn't be any more done. There's a lacquer of it. They're going to take that lacquer and they're going to make a vinyl record out of it. That's it. There's no mastering. There's no remixing. There's no approvals. It's just, there it is, done. So there's kind of a odd sense of, I really kind of enjoy that. Like the old dealer, nothing on my sleeves. Except for a pair of B2s, a B2 A to D and a B2 D to A. Yeah, there are a pair of those over there, and we use them for tape safety. We will do demos and things through them to this little Tascam recorder. Like Jack will be like, hey, just hit record. It's just a little digital Tascam thing, 2-track. I think it's the one that has the DSD input and all that, whatever it is. And then we'll make CDs that way. It makes CDs also. But we use it primarily for when we're doing mixes, when we mix down, because we mix to a 1-inch machine. So we'll hit the 1-inch, and then the 1-inch, once we edit the tape and get it, correct, usually just the tops and tails, we'll rewind it and put it in 96K, put the Tascam in record, and then safety, whatever it was we recorded. We do a 96K and we do a 44-124, both. So 44-124, we make a CD, goes in Jack's car, or we give it to him for him to listen to, and then the 96K ends up going into the vault. We have some sort of hard drive system or something that they have for doing all these digital transfers. And then of course the tape goes in the vault. So, I can tell you that in 20 years the tape will still be able to be played and no one will know how to work a CD. Nobody will be able to find a CD. So, what's this thing? But that's the beauty of analog versus digital. It's so tangible. Oh, here's the tape. Here it is. The music's on here. Or here's a hard drive. Well, there's something on here. Sort of, maybe. So, I don't know. Like the old dealer,
Burl